Hi, everybody. This is Donna Baker, and this is our second edition of The Faces of Monrovia. And if you're not familiar with our project, we do an interview every week with somebody in Monrovia who has a story to tell. And we've interviewed about 90 people so far since I started this project in November of 2021. And so I'm excited that KGEM has offered us the opportunity to talk to these people in person. So today, I'm really happy to introduce you to my special guest from our Faces of Monrovia project, Dylan Feek, who is our city manager. Thank you for being here, Dylan.
Yeah, thanks so much, Donna. It's my pleasure.
I'm glad you made it. So I'm just going to have a conversation with you about you and your story. And so I think the first thing people in Monrovia would love to know about you is how did you end up here in Monrovia?
Really it was by luck and for us, a little bit of prayer. My wife and I were looking for a community. As a city manager, most cities in California have a city manager. And so we were looking for a community where we could come, where I could work, but also where we could buy a home and become part of a community where our kids would go to school. And one of my best friends from college, who I'd maintained a good relationship over the years, even named my firstborn son after this friend, was the city manager of Sierra Madre. And so over the years, he and I would, we'd vacation together, spend time together. I visited him many times in Sierra Madre and came to Monrovia once. And so he called me one day when the position was open. A former manager had announced he was leaving. And so my friend Gabe said, Dylan, you have got to look at this position. It's a great city. And so I did a little bit of research and decided it looks like a beautiful place and let's give it a go. And, here we are today, almost 3.5 years later. It's been wonderful.
I think we hit the jackpot when we got you, Dylan. I mean, I think everybody in town adores having you as our city manager because I think the one thing that's different about you versus the past city managers, and nothing against them, they were all really great, but you communicate so well with the community. And I think that's really endeared you to us, right? Because I think people want to know what's going on. And to have somebody like you at the helm telling us exactly what's happening. So how did it feel? Now, I know you came from Calistoga. That was where you were the city manager prior to Monrovia. And they were prone to fires. Mm-hmm. How did it feel for you to come to Monrovia and then shortly after you got here, not only did we get shut down by COVID in March of 2020, but then in September of 2020, the Bobcat fire was upon us. How did all that affect you personally? And were you regretful of coming to Monrovia? How did that feel?
Never once have I felt regret being here. And I think any city manager will tell you that some days are really hard and you don't want to be doing this job. But the best days and sometimes even the mediocre days are so worth it. And I come into work every Monday morning excited, happy to be serving this community. It's my home. It's where I raise my kids. We're a part of it. So with previous experience in Calistoga, I loved and cherished my opportunities there. It was a small town. My wife and I couldn't live in town. We couldn't afford to live there. And when the fire, they call it the Tubbs Fire, which eventually became the Napa Lake Sonoma Complex, a combination of many fires that came together and created a lot of just chaos and heartache and quite frankly a lot of death, was a very significant fire. And I learned through that experience just how traumatic a wildfire can be. We had to evacuate the city for a full week. We had to communicate with people who were scattered across the entire San Francisco Bay Area. We had a lot of firefighters and dispatchers and folks that work for the city also had family members who lost homes. Wow. And it was very traumatic. And even for me personally, after the fires, I even went through some post-traumatic stress disorder and
no doubt
met with therapists to help me process. Every day my commute was a 15-mile commute where I had to drive through the burn area and look at the homes that were destroyed and know how people died. So it was tough. It was very tough. And I think moving to Monrovia, I certainly had processed a lot of emotion and feeling from the fire. I was, having lived through that experience, I had, a lot of, professional experience now to lean on. And, I moved here in late October of 2019 and was able to enjoy the holiday season. It was a blur. I barely remember anything. And then COVID, and we're having to shut down and people can't go into businesses. So I couldn't even make those face-to-face interactions that I wanted to, that I would hope to, that any city manager should. So I felt like, golly, the first time people might be hearing from me or getting to know me is through email and Zoom meetings. And that's just not very personable sometimes. So I really made it a point to try to communicate well. We have great staff at the city who help me with marketing, with outreach, the city manager's update. While I do play a role in that, there are many staff who also contribute and make sure that we're providing accurate, up-to-date information for residents. So it really is a team effort. And I think when the Bobcat fire happened, it's really interesting. I'm going to put a shout out to one person, Janet Wall. So on the first day of the fire, the county wanted to do all the communications for the fire, which was a little bit of a concern for me. And by the end of the day, Janet sent me this this email, and I kept it because I cherish it. She basically gave me an F on my first day on the job with this fire.
Oh no! And Janet's pretty verbal, so I love her.
And I took that home that night. I actually didn't, go home that night. I slept at City Hall, and I took that with me, and I read it, and I thought, and I spent the night reflecting on what do I need to do different. And I had this clear focus when I came back in the next day that we can't rely on anyone else. This is our time to shine. We pulled everybody in the room and said, we're changing it up.
Good.
Here's what we're going to do. And I, even though I felt some hesitation and nerves that day before, and okay, let's see how the county handles it, it was just such a clearer picture the next day. And I felt like if I, as a city manager, can be a leader during a really stressful time, and we can help people pull through this. So we made it a point to communicate officially 3 times a day. I was going to be on social media regularly. It was an all hands on deck. We had an entire team dedicated to communication and outreach. And I think we were very successful. And I also received an email at the end of the fire from Janet who said, Dylan, you've done a phenomenal job. So
did she give you an A?
Janet has always been she's a wonderful community member. She's a very trusted person, and I respected her even at that point in time. So when she sent that email, she was also doing it from a very loving place. So to me, it was important to receive that, and I cherish it because it really, to me, it was like from a moment in time. We're going to shift. And I think it really helped us get to where we needed to be. So
yeah. Well, I live up in the Burn area. I live up by Canyon Park. And your communication to us was so valuable. I mean, we had our cars packed and ready to go, facing out like you had instructed us to do. And everything that you said, we really listened to and followed. And the fact that when the looky-loos started coming up into my neighborhood and I was able to reach out to you and say, this is just not acceptable. We never have people up here, and now all of a sudden it's a constant traffic jam. And you did not delay. You had those roadblocks up within 20 minutes. I was so impressed, and I want to thank you for that. That was very reassuring for us to know that you were on top of it, and we knew that we were in good hands. So thank you for that.
Well, you're most welcome. What I just want to make sure that I communicate is part of the best part about my job is I work with some amazing people.
You do.
I get to work with people in the community on their projects, building their homes, chasing their dreams. Maybe they just want to plant a tree or fix their approach to their driveway. I get to interact with a lot of people. But when it came time to make these decisions about all the looky-loos who want to come block all of our streets, I have this great staff around that says, hey, we got a problem. Let's go fix it. And, it was a couple, police lieutenants, sergeants, and officers that turn the lights on and they go up and they're going to have some fun chasing some people down and scaring them out.
Yeah, like they did. It worked. And the fire department and the police department, I mean, I have to also give them a pat on the back. They were so helpful, and we felt we were in good hands the whole time. So I know the community really appreciated everything that you and the staff in Monrovia did. We were we were so thankful and grateful that we didn't lose any structures. And I mean, our precious Canyon Park, unfortunately, suffered a lot of damage, but we're in the process of getting that redone. So hopefully that's not too far in the future that we'll be able to go back and enjoy that wonderful place. So I want to ask you, I know that many people saw the video when I was doing the Monrovia Parks Wilderness Recreation Foundation auction, that you had volunteered to have lunch with somebody in the community for the highest bidder. And so I got to ride in one of your classic Mustangs, which was really loud, by the way, and it's really awesome. And so tell us about your passion for Mustangs.
My passion for Mustangs is probably one of my deeper passions in life. You know, I love my family. You know, I love God. I'm a religious person. But when you ask me about what are my hobbies, what do I like to do for fun, it's, you know, Mustangs is going to be at the top of the list. So it's such a problem for me. I have four of them.
Problem?
You know, who needs four old Mustangs? Well, my joke is that you always can have one more. The passion really started when I was a kid. My parents loved them. My father picked up his first Mustang when he was 14 years old and worked on it himself. He made an arrangement as a middle school student in Eastern Oregon to go over and get permission to work at the high school auto shop where he could fix his car. And of course, my grandfather builds old Model Ts, had an auto repair shop as a career. So, you know, car culture in our family is very important. So my parents love Mustangs. I remember the first Mustang I really saw was a 1968 California Special. It was a gold car. My parents bought it. We had it for a couple of years, and with a bunch of young kids, you know, growing up and bouncing balls, you know, in the garage and parking bicycles, they decided to sell it. And that's when I realized I love Mustangs. And as an early graduation gift, my father and mother bought me this 1965 Mustang. It was just a coupe that was rotted out, and I was going to have to work and raise my own money, and my dad would help me rebuild it. And that's the white car that I used for the auction.
Okay, that's a great car.
We went through every inch of that car together, my junior and senior year of high school. We did everything on the car, and there were days right after go to work, and my dad had the day off and he'd work on it himself. You know, it was a you know, father-son project, so it has far more sentimental value to me than it ever will actual value. But it's just a wonderful car, and I have a lot of fun driving it. It's a manual, so you have to learn how to drive the manual, and it's way more fun to drive.
I agree. I mean, if you don't know how to drive a stick shift, you don't know what you're missing, because the stick shift is really you driving the car, not the car driving you, right?
Yep. And you know, after that car, you know, it was shortly after, as we were getting ready to complete that car, I took out a loan to, you know, spend a little bit of money on the upholstery and finish it, but then I was going to complete some undergraduate school studies, and I was out in the county driving around one day and saw a 1967 Fastback, and so I had to make the choice: do I spend this money on college, or do I spend the money on the car? And like any wise 18-year-old would do, I bought the car.
Of course you did.
And that car is it's a fairly rare fastback. I didn't know it at the time, but it's called a 1967 GT390. So it was the largest engine that they put at the time. It had a 4-speed, but it was also a custom order paint. And that car is actually in Salt Lake City right now. It's waiting for its turn in the queue to be restored. And you know, I've owned that car for more than half my life now.
Wow.
And, you know, the desire was always to do something with it. And, you know, I feel like I'm at a point now where, you know, I want to get working on this car. I want to have it restored. I'm not doing the work myself, but I'd love to have it, if possible, in time for the centennial celebration of Route 66, which is coming up in 2026. So, you know, those two cars safely in the garage a couple of years ago, I decided to see if I could track down that 1968 California Special that my parents owned. And we were very fortunate to find the car in Dresden,
oh my God,
Ohio.
that is amazing.
A little help of a private investigator. I wrote some letters to the last known registered owner, and he's a very, very kind, courteous gentleman by the name of Jim Kerr. And he loved the story and said, if you want it, come get it, it's yours. So
For no charge.
No. We had to pay for it.
You had to pay for it.
Now,
Okay,
he
good.
gave me what I would call the family deal. It was a very, very wonderful price because he wanted it to come back to the family.
Sure.
So we were able to, my wife and I, with our fairly newborn daughter, flew out to Ohio and picked the car up sight unseen. And
It ended in Ohio. Wow.
and so that
From
car,
Oregon to Ohio.
well, it was actually, we were living in Salt Lake I lived in Salt Lake as a child, but yeah, Salt Lake, it moved around a few different places and ended in Ohio. Now it's in California to stay.
Great.
And then the fourth Mustang, which is kind of a unique story. Gentleman had owned this car his whole life, and he had passed away, and his family decided to sell the car, and we're able to pick this car up. It's a 1965 Fastback, which is a GT. But what makes it unique is he loved the car and he cared for the car, and he didn't do much to the car. So it sits in its near original condition. It has a beautiful patina on it because he parked it outside underneath the Arizona sun. Which I love that story of the car. And as I work through it and I empty out, 5 pounds of sand from the radiator hoses, it's nice to be able to see this car in its original condition. But the part that to me was proof it belonged with me was as I was opening up the car and going through all the boxes and all the material. I found a little box with something wrapped in it, and I opened it up, and there's a newspaper clipping from the San Gabriel Valley Tribune. And they had a highlight of a 1960, I think it was a 69 Monrovia Kiwanis Club meeting covered
funny.
in the paper. So
What a
it was
small world,
It was
huh?
meant to be with me.
It was meant to be with you.
So those are my 4 Mustangs.
Well, that's awesome. Maybe we should do a whole show about Dylan and his Mustangs. But let's talk about your family. I know you have a nice, well-rounded family. So tell us about your wife, Kira, and how you met, and how many kids you have, and what they're doing.
Kira is she's wonderful. She and I have been married for 14 years. She's the real city manager of Monrovia.
I'm sure she is.
Keeps me on track and helps make sure that I'm making the right decisions. She's my confidant when I'm struggling with stuff. I'll take it home with work, and she always asks, "Can I help? Can I talk to you about it?" She and I have been married 14 years. We met on a blind date.
On a blind date, really? Somebody fixed you up.
Someone fixed us up, and what made it really exciting was, Kira had graduated from Stetson University. She had a marine and aquatic biology degree. She was a collegiate volleyball player, and she had finished up her school, and she was working and living at home, and she worked at an aquarium in Salt Lake City. And I had lived literally 10 minutes away from her, but on the other side of the mountain. And we had never crossed paths before. So we ended up through our different church groups. We got set up through a blind date and ended up liking each other. And the rest is history. Our kids, we've welcomed. We have 3 kids, and we've welcomed them all in different places. So Gabe was born outside of Kansas City when we lived out there wrapping up graduate school. Benson and Eden were both born here in California in different locations. But they, oh my gosh, they love Monrovia. They're my resident experts on the parks and the library and make
and
sure
schools,
that they're
right?
the schools and make sure that they're happy. And it's so much fun getting to talk with them. Things like Lucinda Garcia Park. As I get to drive by and check on it, I'll take the kids and I'll show them the new playground features and get them hoping and dreaming about the park. And that's exciting for me. And they love it here. And we live in a great neighborhood. We purchased our first home here in town. Did a pretty extensive remodel so that we could enjoy it as our home.
Good.
And the kids are just they go to the schools here, and I get
They go to the public schools.
They go to
right?
public
That's
absolutely
great.
Yep, public schools. They go to programs in the district that offer the dual language immersion program. It was very important to us that our kids are bilingual.
Do any of your kids have a passion for cars?
They do. Gabe, the oldest, he could tell you cars from the grill and seeing them from far away.
How old is he?
He's 10.
10.
Benson is 7, and he loves Legos. and is constantly thinking and building, and they're drawing and they're coloring, and they're very much hands-on. We read a lot, so I have a feeling as they get older and start to find the interest to work on the cars, they're certainly going to want to drive the cars. But we'll just make sure that they get to participate in it too. But that's how my dad got me interested, as we worked on it together. And there are times where they'll come out and they'll help me for 5 minutes, because that's how much attention span they'll have. But my hope is that the kids can drive the cars too and enjoy them as much as I did.
Great. Now, I do know that in the interview that you did on the Faces of Monrovia website, you did talk about living in a lot of different places. So where have you lived and where have you traveled to? And why?
So I've lived in many places for a number of reasons. So growing up, I call Mountain Green, Utah my home. It's my hometown. I moved there when I was about 6 and lived there until I was about 19. Mountain Green is a small rural community nestled right up in the mountains, kind of like Monrovia, except much smaller. I think countywide the population was about 10,000 people.
Oh, the whole county.
Yeah, so very small, very rural, very beautiful. But I think that's where my love for small town feel, like I don't want to live in a big city ever.
I don't blame you.
I like visiting for very short periods of time. That just makes me feel more comfortable being in a smaller town. When I was 19, I served a mission for our church. So I lived in the Republic of Armenia and Republic of Georgia.
Wow.
So I speak fluent Armenian and Georgian. When I came home, I returned home to finish school. That's when I got married, and my wife and I then began our finalizing school and college, and then graduate school, and then to become a city manager, you sometimes have to go to where the open space is.
Sure.
There's a career path where you can work in one organization and work your way up. There's another career path where you move around and take steps closer to becoming a manager. So I chose that path. I worked in cities in Kansas and Missouri, Kansas and then Iowa, and then moved out to California, where I've been a manager now in 2 cities. So each place that we've had to move it was wonderful, because we feel like we have these circles of friends and close friends even that I feel like if we're ever anywhere in the country, that we know people somewhere. And it's just wonderful to have that network. But we were always looking for that place we could settle down and raise our family. And, probably, 4 years ago, my wife and I did an exercise where we listed out, what do we want in a community where we want to live? And we wrote out all these different things, like we want it to be a, small town feel, but close to a metro. We wanted a unique downtown. We wanted it to be close to the mountains. Wanted my kids to be able to go to school there, and that's Monrovia. And so we're very hopeful that this is the last stop.
We hope so too. I know I've told you many times, every time I see you, you can never leave Monrovia, because we love having you here, and we've had some great city managers, but I think you're one of the best. And that's just, I'm sure I'm joined by many community members who feel the same as I do. I was fortunate to be able to meet you before COVID hit. When you first started here, we had lunch at Cafe Mundial.
Yeah.
He already knows my favorite thing there is the grilled cheese.
Yeah. With apple slices.
With apple slices and fig jam, right? And I really enjoyed the fact that you were so excited to get to meet the people in the community. And I thought that was a really important thing that you had made a priority. So what is your favorite thing about Monrovia, besides the fact that you live in a fabulous wilderness area?
I don't have a favorite thing. I think there are days where, you come outside in the morning and sometimes you are spooked by a bear.
Yeah.
To later that day, I get to go for a bike ride up on the preserve and watch a sunset, from up on the mountain looking down on the city that you're a part of. To, the historic homes. I mean, find me one neighborhood that's not amazing.
I know.
There's just really not one thing that I love. I think as a manager, you kind of have to be a cheerleader for your city at the same time as you manage the city. But I think where, I really I didn't grow up wanting to be a city manager. I grew up wanting to help people. My parents always taught me to help other people. That's why we did foster care. When I was a kid, my parents had many kids who came through the home. At school, I was always looking to help on different extracurriculars and projects. On my sports teams, I always wanted to be successful in sports because I wanted to work together with other people. And it really wasn't until I returned from my mission as a missionary from outside the country that someone asked me, "Where do you get your water from?" And I had no idea, and I thought, that's kind of interesting. Let's go learn about where clean water comes from. And it was this idea that in local government, you get to serve people every day. And for me, it's like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So
That's your favorite thing.
I didn't know I wanted to be a city manager. I didn't know where my career would take me, but the idea of making sure people have clean water, making sure that, they're safely moving back and forth across their communities through roads and street lights, to even parks. I mean, I love parks. I love open spaces. So to be able to do that professionally and kind of use my talent and my passion and be able to go to work every day and do that, it doesn't get better than that.
That's awesome. I just thought of something to ask you and it went out of my head. Oh, I know. So I know a lot of people are really curious about Canyon Park, and I know that you could talk for an hour about what's going on up there. We only have a little bit more time left to talk. So what is going on up there, and what is the projected finish date of when we may have our beautiful Canyon Park completed and back to normal?
So the most important thing is starting Monday, we are opening up the park through a reservation system.
Right.
We want to let people get up in the park.
Even
and
after
see
the
it.
heavy rain we had last week.
Even after the heavy rain. Now, what people are going to see is they're going to see erosion and debris in the stream beds. They're going to see construction crews that are still up there working because we have a lot of debris to haul out. But they're also going to get to see the impact of Mother Nature and what a wildfire can do and what multiple floods can do. And I think that's an important part of the process. I have seen that park. I've given myself probably close to 100 tours up there. I love it. I spend a lot of time up there. But there are a lot of people who haven't seen it, and we want them to be able to go up and see it, explore the park. As we continue working on the repairs to the park, we want to make it better for the future.
Sure.
So this entire calendar year, we'll expect finalizing design, doing public bidding, and probably initiating a project by June, and then significant amount of construction over the remainder of the year. What's important is we want to go fix everything that's been damaged, but also everything that needed to be replaced.
Yeah, it'd been a long time since those things had been addressed, right?
Yep.
I mean, even the road.
Yep.
So
To come in and fix the road that was washed away would not make sense if we leave the road at the upper part of the park that looks like it needs to be replaced.
yeah, right.
So, it's a very expensive task. We've been spending a lot of time lobbying. We received a federal earmark in the latest infrastructure bill for $3 million. We have
fantastic.
a wonderful council that's been very supportive and is pushing to let's rebuild this, let's make it better. We have groups in the community, Empower, for example, that you're well aware of, that you're a member of,
Yes, I'm on
that
the board.
are helping raise money for things like park improvements, not only at Canyon Park but others. We have so much momentum and excitement. I think the heartache that comes with seeing the park damaged is bad. But the vision and the excitement that comes with rebuilding it and bringing it back, I can't wait for the day when we're done with the construction. We get to welcome people back to the park. They'll see the enhancements, they'll see the newness, the revitalization, and it's still going to feel like Canyon Park. It's just going to be new and hopefully last for the next 100 years. So
Well, I know we're all looking forward to that. So thank you, Dylan. We have to wind up here. Our half hour is almost up. That went really fast. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day. I know you have a lot to do, and so I really appreciate that you took time to come and sit with me and talk to me about the Faces of Monrovia project. If anybody is not familiar with the Faces of Monrovia, you can go to www.thefacesofmonroviaca.com, and you can read all of the wonderful interviews, including Dylan's, and learn more about the stories that the people in Monrovia have to tell. So thank you again, Dylan. I look forward to seeing you around town and riding in your Mustang again sometime, and hopefully you'll do the lunch for Empower next time we have an auction, probably coming up in July. So, did you have your lunch yet?
We did.
Oh, good.
So the auction winner, Deborah, won't share her last name, but it was wonderful to get to spend time with her. And I did offer if she'd like to drive. Her first car was a 4-speed manual transmission, but she elected to be driven around town. So we had.
Well,
a great
I know
time.
you offered to let me drive too, and I turned you down. It was like, no, I haven't driven a stick in a long time. So thank you again. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you for the 3rd edition in about 2 weeks.